Speaker is Colman McCarthy. He's been writing for the Washington Post since 1968, and he is a pacifist, a vegetarian, and an athlete who has run 18 marathons, including Boston and New York. In addition to journalism, he is a teacher. Since 1982, he has had more than 7,000 students in his course on nonviolence. He teaches at Georgetown University Law School, American University, the University of Maryland, and 3 high schools. At American University, students twice voted him Professor of the Year. In his high school classes, he gives no homework.
No more homework.
Yeah!
No exams.
No more exams.
And no tests.
No more tests.
Instead, he believes in pure learning, free of artificial pressure. In 1985, he founded the Center for Teaching Peace, a nonprofit that helps students and schools create peace studies programs. He is the author of 6 books on social justice, as well as the editor of 2 books of peace essays, Solutions to Violence and Strength Through Peace. They are used as course texts at hundreds of schools. Please welcome a good friend, Colman McCarthy.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that nice welcome. I'm delighted to be here, of course, at my home university. And we'll talk about the issues, have plenty of time for dissent and disagreement. I like people who disagree with me. I really have no choice in my line of work as a left-wing journalist. I get a lot of mail every week from readers around the country who do disagree with me. And so we can talk about those issues a little bit and get what's on your mind. And before we start, it might be helpful to take a few moments of silence or reflection, maybe prayer if you believe in prayer. Some do and some don't. And remember all the people here today with us who have been victimized by violence, whether military violence, governmental violence, environmental violence, economic violence, emotional violence, gun violence, racial violence, sexual violence, homophobic violence, gender-based violence, legal violence, illegal violence. Let us remember our prisoners, our refugees, people without homes, without help, without hope. Let us remember the friendless, people who have no access to teachers or lawyers or social workers or doctors or nurses. Let's remember the animals who are killed every day for greed or profit or folly. And let's also remember the people in our own lives who we might have helped, but we were too busy to notice their pain. So we turned away. Let's take a few moments of silence and reflection and take care of that moral obligation. Thank you for that. It's good to do so when we come together on these occasions to examine our lives, examine what gifts we have, what gifts we hope to get. All of you in this room, I would imagine, are American citizens. If you are, you won the birth lottery. The odds against being born an American are about 25 to 1. Those are big odds. How do I get that number 25 to 1? Well, if we had 100 people in this room, and each one represent a nation of the world, only 4 out of 100 will be Americans. So you did well. So what do we do with this luck we have, these great privileges? Well, we either become somebody, as Martin Luther King said, somebody who's self-centered or other-centered. The only 2 types of people. So that's why you're here this summer, to figure out how to use your gifts better, how to cash in on your luck and spread it around. As a journalist here in town, I've been very lucky over the years to have interviewed many of the world's great peacemakers. I've interviewed Desmond Tutu from South Africa, Mary Corrigan from Belfast, Sean McBride from Dublin, Ireland, Perez Esquivel from Buenos Aires, Mother Teresa from Calcutta, Rigoberto Menchu from Guatemala, Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh. What do they all have in common? They all won Nobel Peace Prize. And I always asked them toward the end of the interview, how do we go about increasing peace and decreasing violence? Which ought to be the purpose of our lives if you seek a life of purpose. Almost always the answer came back, we need to go where people are. Because people keep having conflicts and solving them either through violent force or non-violent force. No third option. So the advice was sound. I took it to a local public high school near my office and offered to come teach a class on the philosophy of pacifism and the methods of nonviolence. So the principal said, well, we don't have a class like that here, but if you want to try it out, go ahead. So I did try it out. And the course went well. In fact, these books going around are the ones we use for the classes. It's not a very difficult course to teach. You read the literature of peace, and you read some Gandhi, King, Merton, Jesus, Francis, Amos, Tolstoy, Einstein, Buddha, Sojourner Truth, Anne Ballou, George Fox, Muhammad on the first day, and then we really get into it. And after I rattle off those names, someone always jumps up and says, how did you ever hear of all those people? How come we haven't heard of them? You haven't heard them for an obvious reason. You've been going to conventional schools where we teach everything but. How do I know that? Well, let me ask you two questions. How many of you go to a high school right now where they offer you courses either in peace studies or conflict resolution? Hands? One hand. What school? Again? Phillips. Ah, yes. Very nice. One hand goes up. If this was a peace-seeking society, every hand would have gone up. Second question. How many of you go to a high school where they require you to take algebra and geometry? All hands go up. So if we don't turn things around, there's a good chance you're going to graduate from high school as peace illiterates. But we're going to make sure you graduate from high school knowing all about pi r squared and bonkazoids and crankazoids and dorkazoids and lunazoids and hemorrhoids and steroids and APOids for the deep thinkers. Who cares? Have you ever seen a help wanted ad for an algebraist or a geometrician? I haven't. Now, if you like algebra, some people do. I think it's kind of odd anybody would like algebra, but we need a few odd people around for diversity. Ah, yes. You have an algebra lover here. Yes, pi r squared, carry on, seek the truth. Let me ask you a question. You ever been out on a date with your sweetheart and you walk along, there's a nice full moon out and on the side of the beach and you start to have these feelings and and suddenly you seize the moment, oh darling, what a precious moment this is. I've been waiting to tell you something from the bottom of my heart for a long time. I am deeply in love with algebra. Have you ever done that? If you have, you need to be in therapy real quick. You have a serious problem. But we should talk about our conflicts. Why do we talk about it? We have them every day. There was a study done recently by the American Psychological Association that found out that the average American family when it's together has a conflict every 8 minutes. And those are the functional families. The leading cause of injury among American women, anybody know what it is? It's being beaten up by a man you're living with, or husband, boyfriend, sometimes a father. So it's not just the decrease in the Pentagon budget and coming to our senses. It's in our everyday lives. But if we didn't teach you the solutions, then you don't know about them. And we go on with the same old dumb things without wasting your time on courses you'll never need or find any use for. And you know what goes on in schools. We often process you as though you're slabs of cheese going to Velveeta High School on the way to Mozzarella University and Cheddar Grad School. How's that for a cheesy metaphor? Was it not well crafted? Did everybody get that one? There's always a few slow ones that miss the jokes. They're usually people from Texas. Well, you know, oil and cattle down there, it's hot all day, you know, your mind, your mind goes after a while. Well, look at George W. Bush. I mean, I think Rick Perry can't add. All right, we're losing control here. So you're here, so think about that. Go back to your high schools and get some courses on nonviolence. Otherwise, we're just processing you. For what reason? To make you obey. That's why I don't believe in giving homework, tests, or exams. Those are all forms of obedience. Obey us or else. And you know what happens, and you know how to play the game. Let me ask you a question. How many of you can raise your hands right now and tell everybody else in the little room, think back to all the years you were in school, elementary, high school, middle school, and say with absolute honesty, I've never ever cheated in school. Maybe one or two hands. All right, now let me hear you say it, just so we can hear a thrill.
I have never cheated in school throughout my whole years of school.
Very nice. Give me a nice round of applause. Yeah, very nice. All right, second question. Who has cheated in school? The pan in the audience. That's the pan in the audience in that one. There you go. Hands up. Who has cheated in school? Oh, there we are. That's the good American way. Yeah. Get ahead in life. Come on, get those A's. Well, you can make all A's and go on to fail at life. I've seen it happen. But we beat you up, and all this high pressure, what's it all for? Does making A's, passing tests, and do great homework, does that make you a kinder person? Does it make you a more generous person? I doubt it. It just makes you more obedient. And then you start to obey power, because they know what's best for me. Not always. Power doesn't know what's best for you. You know what's best for you. And if we don't trust you to do that, then things get a little bit messy. And we start telling you what to do with your lives. I teach here at American University. Last semester I had 3 boys who just came back from the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. One of the boys came up to me after the first class and said to me, Professor, I'm going to be with you for the next 14 weeks. I've just come back from 3 tours in Afghanistan. Please don't ever ask me what I did there. I told him I wouldn't. Another boy was just back from the Marines in Afghanistan, and he couldn't wait to tell me what happened. His name is Brandon Fraser. Brandon was a country boy, small town in the Midwest. Didn't do much in high school, just kind of floated through. Couldn't find a job after high school. And he joined the Marines. He wrote an essay for the class about what he did there. It was such a powerful piece, I had to publish it in a newspaper, and I put it in our last book right here, which a piece is possible going around. I want to read a couple lines. No act is more violent than taking another's life. 4 years of my life were defined by training to commit or committing these very acts of violence. During this period, I was one of the Marines put into situations where murder seemed to be the only option. He said murder. He didn't say Operation Iraqi Freedom or bringing justice to Afghanistan. It was murder. For me, this taking of lives was only half of the sad and violent story that was my life from ages 18 to 22. The other half of the story is one that most people do not consider when they sign the military contract that gives away the right to their own lives. So he goes on to talk about what he did. It was mostly breaking into houses, trying to find weapons, and murdering people who had the weapons. Today I feel terrible for what I've done, and I've been haunted by nightmares every night since my return home. So he goes on to talk about the nightmares, how he's trying to get over them. I think he's going to make it. The class was almost therapeutic for Brandon, and he came back a second time and took the class again. There he was. He graduated in the spring, he's doing okay. So that's what we do with you. Martin Luther King, as you know, was killed on a Thursday afternoon in Memphis, Tennessee. Anybody know where he gave his last and final Sunday morning sermon? 1 mile from here, at the National Cathedral. It was a great talk. Is that large book going around called Solutions to Violence? Would you turn to page 69 for me? Martin Luther King, I covered him when I was a young reporter starting out the South. He died an angry man. He thought he wasn't getting anywhere. He didn't think the country was listening to him. And in one of his last talks, on page 69, in the upper right-hand corner, if you would just stand up for a moment and read that line out loud. I knew that I could never again raise my voice. You see on the upper right-hand corner? Here's King talking about the United States government.
I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the opposed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government.
Thank you. There's King. My own government is the world's most violent. We hide that King from you. There's a new memorial downtown near the mall that has 14 quotes carved into granite. Do you think that quote is among them? Certainly not. There's another quote not there either on the next page of that book. Would you just, on page 70, there on the upper left paragraph, the last line, he now talks about the money. A nation that continues year after year. You see the upper left paragraph, the upper left paragraph, the last line?
Yeah.
Here's King now, I'll just stand up for a moment, just read it out loud. Here's King talking about the money now.
A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death.
Thank you. In other words, when the government spends more money killing than healing, something's wrong. They've lost their soul. And to put it in a better way for you to figure out what's happening, here is what we call a visual. On the left-hand side, let's see, right over here. No, on the right-hand side. This is right. I'm a little confused. Over here in the red part is military spending, 60%. Over on the right is what we spend on the State Department on diplomacy, health and education. 60% of every federal dollar that goes to military or security programs. And yet we feel less secure than ever. Now we got to whip up a war with Iran. Let's hurry up and do it, says Romney over there now. So how does it affect your lives? Well, most of you will go to college, and you're going to graduate from college with two things. a diploma which may or may not mean anything in our economy, because our economy is broken. And what else will you graduate with? A pile of debt. The average debt now in medical school is about $50,000. At Georgetown Law School, where I teach, it's about $110,000, just getting out of the gate. So you've grown up since 1991, and we've had 2 wars for you. One wasn't enough. We had to have 2. And we've been fighting wars that can't be won, can't be explained, and can't be afforded. You have a right to be angry about that. We have an economy that's broken. High unemployment rates among blacks between 18 and 25 is about 35%. Houses being lost. The food banks are running out of food. The homeless shelters are packed. I get emails from college folks just graduated. If you know of any jobs out there, the jobs aren't there. You can't even get unpaid internships. The economy is so bleak. So that's why it's important for you to go back to your home high schools, which is where you are and where you have some power, and get those courses into place. So you learn about the alternatives to military violence. I don't blame anybody in the military. They are not the problem. Who's the problem? I am. I have to figure out, and you are. We have to figure out how to become better people, more educated people, and people who know how to resist abusive governments. I don't think anybody ought to graduate from high school without organizing at least one student strike. You learn a lot about power that way. And what should you do when you organize a student strike? Well, I'll tell the principal, we want to get a peace studies program here at our high school. And the principal will probably tell you, well, that's very nice, darling. You go back to your algebra class and behave, and we'll form a committee to think about this. That's not enough. So organize a strike and get about 100 of your friends and lie down every morning and block the faculty parking lot. Make the teachers walk to school. It'll activate their brain cells. And then if they give you more trouble, I'll call a local newspaper and call a press conference and say, we want to get a peace class here. And the principal said no. Guaranteed to make page 1 of the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'll write about it. It's a guaranteed story. You know the old principle, when the other side does not see the light, make them feel the heat. You're the heat. You have more power than you realize. So how do we become peacemakers in our personal lives, which is where it matters also. I teach at 2 schools. One's a very large, chaotic high school. We have 6 police in the halls. They all carry weapons and wear bulletproof vests. You got to walk through the school to get in there through metal detectors. And the cops have guns all ready for you. I said to one of the cops the other day, you must feel pretty safe, don't you, with that bulletproof vest on? He said, no, it's not knife-proof. I wasn't joking. The other school is a very fine school in Bethesda, Maryland. Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. And I bring in the class every semester the best teacher in the high school. Her name is Lily Flores. Who is she? Well, Lily's from El Salvador. She left that country in the mid-1980s when there was a civil war going on. Lily was about 14. She was afraid she was going to be killed by the government. Oscar Romero, who was the president of El Salvador, who was the archbishop in San Salvador, wrote a letter in 1979 to Jimmy Carter, who was then the president, and said, please don't send any weapons to the government. They can use them on the poor people, on the labor leaders, the priests and the nuns, and the teachers. If you want to help us, send food, clothing, medicine, pencils, bicycles, books, but please, don't send weapons. What did Jimmy Carter do? He said, well, we're the United States. He said, we're the United States of America. We're the exceptional nation. We know what's best for you. And started sending weapons. There'd be 75,000 Salvadorans killed in the 1980s. About 300,000 displaced, including Lily Flores. You can make a metaphor out of that. Imagine you're the parents and you come home from work one afternoon, and there are your children on the living room floor. One's about 5, one's about 6 or 7, and they're playing with the toys. And one of the children says to the other, oh, those are my toys, you can't have them. The other one said, no, they're my toys, you can't have them. And you're the all-wise parent, and you say, oh, children, starting to fight among yourselves. I know how to solve your problem. Here's your gun for you. Here's your gun for you. I'll go back and